All right, welcome to this week in legal blogging for January 7th, 2021, our first episode of the new year. Happy New Year to everybody. This is a program in which we talk with leading bloggers from across the legal industry. It's presented by SCOTUSblog, providing lawyers with turnkey digital publishing solutions and strategic consulting for 16 years. You can find out all about it at lexblog.com/products. And I am Bob Ambrogi. I am the host of the program. I have my own blog called Law Sites and my own podcast separately called Law Next. I hope you'll check those out. This show, you can find all of our back episodes, both as podcasts in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube at youtube.com/lexblog. Today, I'm very happy to have with us as our guest, Amy Howe. Amy is a co-founder, longtime editor, and now a contributing reporter for SCOTUS Blog and has her own blog as well, separate from all that, Howe on the Court. Amy, welcome to the show.
Happy New Year. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, you could have said Happy New Year a couple of days ago. I don't know if that even applies.
Yeah, we were all so excited about 2021, and
I know it. It's letting me down already.
As somebody said, I think I saw on Twitter, the 13th month of 2020.
Yeah. Like we'll just call 2021 starting in February or something. But yeah, how are you? How have you been doing? Not just since just the last couple of days, but over the course of this almost a year now that we've been in this crazy situation.
I cannot complain. We've all been healthy. I have 2 teenagers, so they've been mostly at home, but their schools are back part-time. It's they call it hybrid learning, and they're much more technically adept than I am. So, during the day when they're at home for remote learning, they're not requiring a lot of assistance, which is good because I wouldn't really be able to provide it. And then the court, of course, has been remote since May.
Right.
So covering oral arguments, the live audio is covering them from my kitchen table, in my exercise clothes is a very different experience.
Yeah. Would you have traditionally been in the press gallery there at the court? And
Exactly. I've had what's called a hard pass now for a couple of years, and so I attend all of the arguments that I cover and try to attend as many as I can. And so to not be there in person, to be doing it, the one that try to look for the tiny little things when you can. At least I can take notes on my laptop instead of by hand. You get a lot more that way, but would still much rather be there in person. I miss being at oral arguments in person and seeing my colleagues in the press room and seeing the folks in the public information office. It's very, very different.
Yeah. Is the hard pass the pass that you were not able to get before? Because I remember for a long time, SCOTUSblog was kind of fighting this battle of trying to get a legitimate press pass to cover the court, and the court wouldn't give it to you.
That's right. And in the end, so we were sort of trying to get one from the court, and then there was a battle with the Senate Press Gallery, because for a long time the Supreme Court relied on the Senate Press Gallery for its credentialing. If you had a press pass from the Senate Press Gallery and you went to the Supreme Court and said that you were a full-time Supreme Court reporter, they would rely on your Senate Press Pass to give you a Supreme Court hard pass. And we weren't able to get one for me. Lyle Denniston, who covered the Supreme Court for SCOTUSblog, had one, and then the Senate Press Gallery took it away. There was a whole set of appeals.
Which is, crazy, because Lyle is one of the most esteemed Supreme Court reporters of all time.
Lyle, yes, who will be 90 this year.
Wow.
But so then the Supreme Court and the Senate Press procedures diverged, and so now, based on some changes to the Supreme Court's procedures, Lyle was able to get one, and then I was able to get one. So it makes a huge difference in our reporting.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you're even talking about that underscores how significant this blog, how SCOTUS blog has become, and probably how much it's evolved from the days when you first launched it. I mean, you and Tom Goldstein, who are both husband and wife and were law partners, I think, at the time as well, launched this in 2002. What was the original vision for this? What were
Right. I mean, I think that's right. I think it's a good point. The original vision honestly was sort of business development. Tom and I were practicing together. It was just the two of us, and we were trying to be a Supreme Court boutique firm, a very boutique-y kind of firm, because it was just the two of us. And we hadn't done any of the things that people who normally practice before the Supreme Court had done. We hadn't gone to Harvard or Yale or Stanford, and we hadn't clerked at the Supreme Court, and we hadn't worked in the Solicitor General's office. And so the way that we thought we might be able to build up some business was by starting this blog that showed off how much we knew about the Supreme Court. And it turned out to not actually be that effective of a business development tool, but that was really what it was at the beginning. It's hard to find some of the early posts on the internet, but if you could find them, they would say things like, here's the petition for certiorari that we just filed, and here's why it's so great. And over the years, it kind of evolved into more of a, along the lines of what it is now, of a public resource. And now we've got, I'm not practicing law at all. Tom is really, his title is the publisher, but he's really involved in this sort of 35,000 foot decisions. And we, have a pretty strict wall between stuff that Tom and his firm do and the coverage. So people who are working at the firm don't, write about the cases. I don't write about the firm's cases. We bring in somebody, the SCOTUS blog brings in somebody else to cover those cases. Try to be like any other journalistic news site.
Yeah. I remember back around the time that you guys launched it, I was the editor of the National Law Journal back around then, and Tom used to write a column for us. I don't know if you ever contributed to that at all, but it was called Circuit Splits, and he would kind of look for the splits among the circuits that were likely to make their way to the Supreme Court. And I don't know if that was sort of in some way a predecessor for the blog at all, but it was a great column. And how did it kind of evolve from that marketing thing to the media thing that it became?
Sure, it was sort of gradual at first. I think part of it was we realized that was not a particularly effective business development tool. And then
why wasn't it, do you think? I wonder why that was, because so many people think blogs are such great business development tools. I wonder why it wasn't working that way.
I think there's a couple of different things going on. I mean, I think part of it is, the way that people, the Supreme Court world is very small, that the universe of cases at the Supreme Court is quite small. And the people who are making decisions about whether to hire Supreme Court lawyers aren't going to necessarily do it on the basis of blogs. Let's be honest. It's a pretty competitive environment in terms of trying to get Supreme Court cases. Yeah. And so, once we realized that, and also we brought on in SCOTUS blog brought on Lyle Denniston, who was a true grit reporter, and he wasn't going to stand for anything less than sort of the same journalistic standards he'd been applying for the first 50 years of his career. Right.
Yeah, but at that point, you remained editor till fairly recently, right? Till what was it, 2016 or something?
Yeah. Right? So my title was editor until Lyle retired in 2016, and I did some reporting, as the editor, covering some of the cases that Lyle didn't want to cover, and then covering some of the cases that Lyle was covering using for what we called the plain English feature. And then when Lyle, and I'm going to put retired in air quotes here, back in 2016, then I became the blog's full-time reporter as an independent contractor. and as Lyle had been, and then we hired an editor. SCOTUSblog hired an editor, Edith Roberts, who was a practicing lawyer and had clerked for then Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Edith worked for SCOTUSblog for 4 years, and then she actually stepped down this year. And SCOTUSblog hired a new editor, James Ramoser, who's again a practicing lawyer turned reporter.
Yeah. So is that the entirety of your staff? I'm looking at your masthead. You have a masthead like a traditional publication would. You have other people listed there. Who is writing for SCOTUSblog at this point? Who's part of the team?
So there are a couple of James, and then Cal Goldie, who is a relatively recent college graduate, is the blog's manager, and so he works a lot of sort of the both substantive and sort of making the trains run on time parts of the blog. Does some writing for the blog. Make sure that we have authors for different posts, and works with James on the calendar. Usually we're in a transition right now. The deputy editor is someone who also works at Goldstein and Russell, Tom's law firm, doing administrative tasks, and we're in a transition right now. Katie Bart held that job until recently, also a recent college grad. So there's really only a couple of people who work for SCOTUSblog, either full-time or as an independent contractor full-time. And then you start to have sort of a cast of regulars who write for the blog a lot, but have day jobs. People like John Elwood, who does the Realist Watch column. Andrew Ham, who is a former blog manager, now in law school, who keeps track of all of the petitions. Ron Collins, who does book reviews. Steve Ramil, who writes the law students column. Then you start to have people who, Amanda Frost, who does scholarship. And then you have people who, law professors and lawyers. The Supreme Court has their dockets not that big, but it's still more cases than I can cover. And so there are also lawyers and law professors who have particular areas of expertise who cover, cases at the court that I do not cover. So, there's a Columbia law professor named Ronald Mann who covers a lot of bankruptcy, securities law cases, ERISA cases, stuff like that.
Yeah. How long did it take you to kind of get the formula right in terms of what you wanted the whole blog or website or whatever you want to call it to be? Because I remember it's certainly over the kind of the first decade up into I don't know, 2012 or so. There were a couple of different times you changed the format of it, and I think you originally started as a blogger blog and then went on to WordPress and then kind of moved and experimenting with different ways of presenting the information and organizing it. Is that still a work in progress, or have you kind of come down with a formula that you're happy with there?
I think it's still a work in progress. One person I left out is Katie Barlow, who's the one, like we're doing a lot more since Katie arrived at the firm with social media. So not just Twitter, but things like Instagram Live and Facebook Live. So it is still a work in progress to try and figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to cover things. And we have had the last 4 years no shortage of content, but I feel like you can always do it better, not just substantively, but in terms of sort of what the formula is.
Yeah. And it must be difficult. I mean, you've got not just news content, but you have really a lot of you must have a ton of archival content at this point that I'm sure has great value in and of itself. I mean, do you in any way try and, how much is that as a part of what your audience is coming to you for, the sort of the historical aspect as opposed to just the current awareness?
I think there is a lot of that, and Less so now that the Supreme Court has, in the past couple of years, the Supreme Court has gone to electronic filing, so that if you go to a Supreme Court case online, you can now get on the court's docket all of the filings in that case. But for a long time, SCOTUSblog was the one, the site that had all of those. If you wanted to see all of the amicus briefs in the case and to have links to them, the joint appendix or whatever, SCOTUSblog started doing that.
It'd be the place.
Quite a while before the Supreme Court did, and some of that, a lot of that, SCOTUSblog started doing that, maybe around 2007. It is not all, not all of the links still work necessarily, but a lot of it is still there. And so somebody had asked me for something the other day, and it gets much harder to find things before 2007.
Yeah. There have been points at which you've really probably really been at the center of attention. Maybe none so much as when the Obamacare decision was going to come down from the Supreme Court, when it seemed like all eyes were on SCOTUSblog, and I think I read somewhere that you were getting like you had like 1 million people coming to the site at once or in a day or something like that. I forget the exact number. But at what point did you guys realize that this was, this was big, this was something, this had a sort of a life of its own?
I think it was the SCOTUSblog or the healthcare decision.
Yeah.
I still sort of grapple with the idea that people read the blog, which is, considering that I spend all day, every day, 7 days a week.
They do. Trust me, they do.
I think
maybe
it probably was right around then that you sort of realize that, wow, it actually is kind of a thing. And the funny thing is, I think because of, part of that was sort of the perfect storm. It was the last day of the court's term. So everyone knew that the healthcare decision was coming down that day. And, there was just such intense interest because of the 2012 presidential election. And then, Twitter wasn't as popular then as it is now. We have not had any numbers on any live blog, even remotely close to that since then. So it really was like that sort of one moment in time.
Right. Well, but you've also been in an interesting time because over the time that this blog has been operating, it's been the same time that some of the traditional sources of coverage of the court have been drying up a little bit. I think it certainly used to be that many more organizations, the media organizations, had people stationed at the court reporters stationed at the court covering the court, and there isn't as much of that anymore. So, do you think that that's played a role in the popularity of your blog and in readership of your blog?
I think that's right. I think it is. Sorry, there's a fire truck going by. I think, the combination that there is not as much, that there are fewer outlets covering, on a day-to-day basis. And so that there are these, obviously everybody covers the cases that I call the cases that are going to be on the front page of the New York Times, but SCOTUSblog covers all of them.
Right.
And then the cases that are going to be, some of the other cases, the cases that are going to be on the front pages of the New York Times or whatever, SCOTUSblog covers them in such excruciating detail, not just, my story, my, 1,800 to 2,000 words on it, which is probably is more space than a lot of other news outlets are going to be able to give it. And then the symposium that follows that SCOTUSblog runs after the really big decisions in which people debate it. And then I also think, there is perhaps because it's all we do, people from both sides of the ideological spectrum tend to trust us a little bit.
Yeah. Is this, I assume this is a business. I mean, does the SCOTUS blog make money from what it's doing?
No.
No. Does it try to, or it's not? How does it support? Who pays the staff?
I mean,
and
we
all?
we have a wonderful sponsorship from Case Text that pays salaries, but it is not something we're going to get rich off of. We
yeah. So what you said that you're not practicing anymore. I know that you have argued some cases in the Supreme Court, I believe, or at least been involved in some cases at the Supreme Court. And I know Tom certainly has. And yet when you started the blog, I think neither of you had any cases at the Supreme Court back in 2002. I may be wrong. I think I read that somewhere.
I had not, but in 2002, Tom had.
Okay. I had read an interview with him where he said he hadn't yet when he started the blog. So did the growth of the Supreme Court? You're saying that you found it didn't kind of work as a marketing thing right away. Do you think the blog at any point played a role in the growth of Tom's practice or your practice, or were they just two entirely separate things?
He would be, because he has. I mean, I really have not been practicing in quite a while, and certainly not since the blog really took off. So he'd be much better suited to weigh in on that. I think he would, but I think I think less in the sense that I think he probably would say that he couldn't point to a case that he'd gotten because of the blog, but that certainly the blog makes him look, helps make him look good in a way that is helpful to his practice.
Yeah. So you also have your own blog, How on the Court, which it is by my, if I got this right, you launched it in 2015, or at least that's the earliest post I could find on it.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? Why did you want to have your own blog separate from SCOTUS blog?
So my press credential through the Supreme Court is for my own blog, How on the Court. The Supreme Court, when it when it did its own rules for press credentialing, made clear that a blog that is owned by someone who practices at the court, as SCOTUS blog is not going to get its own press credential. So Lyle Denniston, when he was reporting for SCOTUS blog, was an independent contractor who had also had his own blog called Lyle Denniston Law News, which he still operates today. And I have my press credential for my blog, How on the Court.
And how do you decide what goes where? What are you writing for your blog? What are you writing for SCOTUS blog?
Yeah. Sometimes it's just a question. Sometimes I put, sometimes the content of my blog is perhaps a little more informal, or, something that just wouldn't necessarily, is perhaps a little more sort of forward-looking, something, the cases that are going to be on the Supreme Court's long conference, for example. There's not, it just kind of depends.
Yeah. So with regard to SCOTUS blog, as I say, on this program, we've been interviewing a lot of legal bloggers. Do you consider yourself at this point, or do you consider that SCOTUS blog to be a legal blog or a media organization, or how do you think about it in your own mind as to what it actually is?
I think we started as a legal blog, thinking of ourselves as a legal blog, but now we think of ourselves as a media organization.
And what does that mean? I mean, you talked about, Lyle coming and demanding certain standards of journalistic professionalism in the organization. How does your thinking about yourself as a media organization in any way affect maybe how you operate, how you cover things?
I mean, I think it affects it I'm not sure necessarily how I would tell you that this. I guess I think of blogs as more opinionated, and I may be wrong, but we try to sort of hold ourselves to the same standards that the Washington Post or the Times or NPR would. It's just that it just so happens that the Supreme Court is our only topic.
Yeah. Do you think that there's anything that by virtue of being a blog that you can bring to the table that maybe the New York Times can't in terms of your coverage of the court, that a traditional media organization might not be able to?
I mean, we are. What exactly do you mean by that?
I don't know what I mean. I was hoping you would know what I mean. I mean, I guess I'm just wondering. Do you think that you have any advantage or disadvantage other than press credentials, right, I guess, by being a blog? Are you perhaps maybe more nimble, more able to cover a broader range of topics? There's no right answer, and maybe there is no answer. I just thought I wondered if you see yourself as pretty much on a par with the other media organizations that cover the court, or if you feel you have some either advantage or disadvantage by virtue of being more of a blog.
I mean, I think because we are a one-trick pony, so to speak, our lane is very narrow, but we have saturated it very thoroughly.
Yeah. And
the people that SCOTUS Blog gets to write, are generally experts, either lawyers or law professors or people who know a lot about the Supreme Court.
Yep.
I think is the advantage.
Yeah. Have you have you thought about it? Is there a future to SCOTUS Blog? What is the long-term future? Do you keep doing it forever? Does it evolve in some way? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, Lyle is 90, so I've got a while before I have to start thinking about that.
Yeah. All right. So that you're saying that a lot depends on Lyle, I guess, is what you're saying.
No, I mean, I'm just saying, I guess when your predecessor retired, at the age of 85, yeah. and you cover an institution, where middle-aged is, people in their 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Yeah. You're such a SCOTUS Blog, I think, is such a unique publication in the world of blogging, because it really has become more of a media institution almost in its own way. But I wonder if you have any thoughts or advice to share on for others who are blogging on what makes for a good blog, what makes for something that readers are going to want to come to and engage with.
I think the couple of pieces of advice that I have. I mean, I think first is that I think whatever you write about, it needs to be well written, to keep people coming back to read it over and over again. And then the second thing is that I feel like you can always, would be to set a relatively narrow lane. You can always widen it, but it's much easier to, cast the net relatively narrowly and do a good job covering that. And then, you can always expand it if you want. And, I feel it's relatively, there are a lot, legal blogging has become a lot more popular. And I know that most people who try to do it are doing it while they have a day job, and it's time consuming to do it at, when you still have billable hours, or, you've got to be in court all day or whatever it is you're doing. There are still, perhaps because of that, there are still opportunities to find, these niches to occupy, and then you can become the expert.
Yeah. Has your writing style evolved over the years of doing this blog?
I think yes. I think it has. I think particularly in the last several months even, I've always tried to write sort of in a plain English style. SCOTUSblog's new editor, James, has really tried to, to get me to punch up my writing a little bit. I've tried to write in relatively plain English, but I think was writing still kind of like a lawyer writing in plain English, and he's tried to get me to write more like a journalist who used to be a lawyer in plain English.
Does that suggest? I mean, who reads? Do you know who your readers are? I mean, are you assuming that they're largely an audience of legal professionals, or is it a much broader audience who reads your blog?
I think it's a broader audience than that. And, honestly, I think that to the extent that it's a legal audience, it's, it may be people who are, not immersed in the field. Some of my friends who are lawyers, but not Supreme Court lawyers, who want to know what's going on. If you're a Supreme Court lawyer, you probably are going to go read. You might go read. I'd love to have you read it, but you might go read something else
right.
that's more technical. What mootness or standing is, and you don't need me to explain it to you.
Yep. Well, Amy, before we wrap up, any other final thoughts about blogging or SCOTUS blog or anything else that you'd like to share with us?
No, thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you, and
talk to you
congratulations
too.
on many, many years of great work and great success with SCOTUS blog. And keep going until you're 90.
Thanks.
Yeah. So we have been talking with Amy Howe, who's a co-founder and now a reporter for SCOTUS blog, and also author of her own blog, Howe on the Court. This is Bob Ambrogi, and on behalf of everybody at LexBlog, thanks a lot for watching or listening, however you're consuming this. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we'll be back with another episode of This Week in Legal Blogging next week, so stay tuned.